Hi, I'm Carrie Gracie, and this is episode 3 of Murder in the Lucky Holiday Hotel. Previously.
He always said he'd have a throat cut if she made life difficult for him.
Puzzling why he was there.
Pull strings and make things happen.
Her personal life was a mess.
Power exuded from him.
If you want to have affairs, don't be a politician.
We ended our last episode in 2011 with the British business fixer Neil Heywood on a plane bound for Chongqing. And to understand what happened next, we need to know more about this incredible city of 30 million set in the steep hills of southwest China. Mobsters, money, guns, gambling, prostitutes, and corrupt politicians. Like Chicago in the 1930s, Chongqing is legend. It became the backdrop for this story that would change China. And in charge, the equally legendary薄熙来.薄熙来was the son of a Communist Party hero, and he had big ambitions. He didn't want to be here in the sticks. His political enemies in Beijing had united to exile him among the mobsters. But his aim was to rule China, and he wasn't giving up without a fight. If he couldn't hog the spotlight in the capital, then he was going to bring that spotlight with him.
When he went to Chongqing, he said, what the hell, he's going to make a splash, or he's just going to go for it and begin to really grandstand, you might say, or do dramatic things.
薄熙来old teacher, Stephen McKinnon, was still in touch.
He must have known it was risky. He felt he'd been marginalized and they were putting him out to pasture, so what the hell?
The whole of China looked on spellbound as薄熙来did something no one had dared to do since Chairman Mao. He went above the Communist Party machine and spoke directly to the public. Think Donald Trump. He dusted off the propaganda campaigns of early communist China. He had Chongqing singing Mao's songs at mass rallies. 100,000 people amid a sea of red flags. The public loved it.
His sort of touch as a politician, his charisma as a personality, did have an impact of somehow connecting to the common man.
If you want the public to support you, you have to do something for them.
Lawyer Li Zhuang worked in Chongqing during the薄熙来era.
He built roads, he fixed street lamps, cleaned up the city. He gave the public better health care, raised salaries and funded mass rallies to boost his profile. But he needed money. Chongqing wasn't rich, so what could he do? There was a fast way to make money. Arrest all the rich people and throw them in jail, call them criminals, confiscate their assets, clean them out on the day of arrest. Apartments, villas, office buildings, cars, bank deposits, everything would be confiscated. For a small crime boss, tens of millions. For a big crime boss, it could be more than 100 million, overnight.
In China, the assets of a mafia boss can be confiscated like that. So薄熙来called anyone and everyone a mafia boss, and he got all the money he needed. He arrested thousands and executed powerful people. Again, the public loved it. But in China, no politician can go after the rich and well-connected without the support of the chief of police. In Chongqing, his name was Wang Lijun. He's the fourth key character in our story. We couldn't tell you what happened in the Lucky Holiday Hotel without him. Wang Lijun was a narcissist. He arrived at crime scenes, brandishing weapons and surrounded by TV cameras. He even had his own show, dramatizing his life fighting crime. It was called Iron-Blooded Police Spirit, and it gets weirder. Our sources confirm reports that Wang Lijun attended executions, he supervised the harvesting of prisoners' organs, and he even conducted his own autopsies. He was the perfect police chief for Bo Xilai.
Wang and Bo were very similar. Both of them liked to do things on an epic scale. They liked to make headlines. Put them together and it was an explosive mix. Both of them were crazy. And the atmosphere they created, well, it was frenzied, intense, it was insane. Chongqing was a police kingdom.
So we're now at the police headquarters in Chongqing, which is where Wang Lijun worked. And this is not just a police headquarters like you'd see in some other country or some other city in China. The police really want to look intimidating. And even within Chinese police headquarters I've seen, this one counts as massive beyond massive. It's a great big white fortress behind impenetrably high walls. This is where Wang Lijun worked. And he not only worked here, he lived here. He was paranoid. He thought people were out to get him. And so his staff say that in those days when he was running this place, his secretary had to taste every bite of food he ate, even down to sipping his cups of tea to make sure that they weren't poisoned. A paranoid narcissist living in a fortress and blurring the line between fact and fiction. No wonder people in Chongqing remember Wang Lijun. And high-profile lawyer Li Zhuang has even better reasons than most. Because the police chief turned up in person to arrest him on the tarmac at Chongqing Airport, surrounded, of course, by TV cameras and with a film-ready script.
The scene was so big, loads of police cars surrounded the plane, riot police in helmets and camouflage, armed with submachine guns. I asked, why the big show? Is it Obama's state visit, or are you capturing Osama bin Laden? We were surrounded by a huge scrum of reporters. He wanted to show his authority on camera. He was in a trench coat, hands in his pockets. He said, Li Zhuang, we meet again.
Li Zhuang's arrest was big news across China. Not only were Wang Lijun and his boss Bo Xilai taking on crime gangs, now they were even taking on the well-connected lawyers who defended them.
I was jailed for 548 days. That's a year and a half. I thought I would die in Chongqing, and that they would rule China.
Ruling China was certainly Bo Xilai's ambition. But to have any chance of success, he needed to do more than lock up the gangsters and their lawyers. Behind them were the really powerful players, his political enemies in Beijing. With a loyal police chief by his side, Bo Xilai thought he was a match for them. Until Neil Heywood checked into the Lucky Holiday Hotel. The Lucky Holiday Hotel is not a destination I recommend. This is the villa in which Neil Heywood died. Quite secluded, it's quite lonely, it's at the end of a cul-de-sac, and surrounded by vegetation, the hillside falling away below. So we're now having an altercation with the security outside Villa 16. They're getting very agitated because they don't want us here. Now we've got 3 local security from the complex, and there's somebody else coming this way now. Oh, and there's somebody else up on the balcony.
至少影响我。
你怎么能感觉因为你
我影响好像影响，我觉得作为我的口。
So I can't get a word in edgeways here.
Please go go go. Oh, go go go. 就是 OK.
The manager tells me to put my questions about Neil Heywood's death to Neil Heywood. So how can we ask Neil Heywood when he's dead? He's telling us to ask Neil Heywood.
到酒泉去问，发生了哦。
So you're going to help to ask him why he murdered.
It's sinister. The manager says we should go to hell to find Neil Heywood and ask him. Neil Heywood died in November 2011. A decade had passed since the hot air balloon and the bunga bunga money in Bournemouth. Back then, he'd helped薄熙来wife谷開來move money through tax havens into property in the West. But at some point, the trust between her and Neil Heywood had broken down.谷開來had moved to Chongqing to play the part of the politician's wife. But in the frenzied climate of that city, she was becoming ever more isolated and paranoid.
But in a way, paranoia is rational in the Chinese political system because people almost certainly are out to get you.
James Richards is a former British diplomat in China and a friend of Neil Heywood's.
谷開來believed that she and her husband had been poisoned and were going to die. And she was depressed and angry and vindictive about that. This according to Neil, of course.
Chinese history is full of poison plots and paranoia.谷開來no longer trusted anyone, including her former fixer, Neil Heywood.
From what Neil said, the estrangement was very clear and definite. And I think it was painful to Neil, actually. I think he had feelings of admiration in some ways for薄熙來and谷開來and a friendship. And they'd been in touch a long time.谷開來was furthermore godmother to Neil's daughter. And I think it may have been the prospect of somehow resolving the issues between them, possibly repairing the relationship, but certainly resolving the issues between them that led to his going down to Chongqing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chongqing. See you next time and have a nice day. Thank you.
On the 13th of November 2011, Neil Heywood arrived in Chongqing. This is one version of what happened next. Everything has been arranged. A car takes him from the airport, along Chongqing's new highways, and up a winding mountain road to a secluded villa complex, the Lucky Holiday Hotel. Neil Heywood and谷開來have dinner, and in his room, they share a nightcap. Neil Heywood gets drunk, staggers to the bathroom, and slips over in his own vomit.谷開來calls in her assistant, who's been waiting outside the bedroom door, the same person who accompanied Neil Heywood from Beijing. Together they drag Neil Heywood onto the bed. He begs for water. She drips poison into his mouth. She waits until she can no longer feel Neil Heywood's pulse, and then谷開來scatters pills around the room to make it look like an overdose. And as she leaves, she hangs a do not disturb sign on the door. Again, this is one version of what happened. We'll come to others. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The official story at the time was very different. "5 weeks after Neil Heywood's death, a memorial service at a church on the banks of the River Thames in London.
I felt rather miserable, and I could see that Neil's family who were there were profoundly upset, as were some of his old school friends who were there.
James Richards. There was no body to bury. It had been cremated in Chongqing 2 days after the British consulate had been notified of the death. Nobody at the memorial service knew that Neil Heywood had been murdered. There'd been no autopsy. The official cause of death had been given as excessive alcohol consumption. The family had been told he'd died of a heart attack. James Richards had spent many evenings with Neil Heywood in China, and he didn't believe either version.
I do recall feeling most uncomfortable with that, because Neil was, 40, 41 at the time. He was slim. He did not look like someone who would likely have a heart attack. Neil was not a great drinker in my experience. One of the reasons why I felt I was surprised when I heard, and suspicious when I heard, that he might have got drunk and that this might have contributed to his death. When I heard that he died in Chongqing, and further that his body had been cremated soon after his death, my suspicions grew very strong, to the point where if I'd been asked to place a bet one way or the other, I would have said that I believed he was likely to have been murdered.
Back in Chongqing, business as usual. Our police chief, Wang Lijun, had covered up the murder for the boss's wife. Forensic evidence destroyed. Body cremated. Officers silenced. No problem. And for a while, the cover-up seemed perfect. But then, something went very wrong between our 3 surviving characters: the politician, his wife, and his police chief. 12 weeks after the murder, police chief Wang Lijun was running for his life. The man who normally loved the limelight got into his car under cover of darkness. Disguised as an old woman, he drove 200 miles to the nearest American consulate, and he begged for their protection. Once inside, he told an astonishing story. Next time on Murder in the Lucky Holiday Hotel, a tricky moment for American diplomacy.
It was becoming a very dangerous situation.
The British come looking for answers.
It is a death that needs to be investigated in its own terms, without political consideration.
And the murderer's playboy son enters the stage.
I have never driven a Ferrari.